This year was the first year of my attempt to grow ground cherries. I thought, the last few years I grew tomatillas, and ground cherries are very similar with their cute little whispery packets that surrounds the cherry inside. Oh yes, this was going to be a fun season for growing ground cherries. I had no idea what this season was going to be like, whether it was going to be drought or too much rain or bug pressure or critter pressure, but I was up for the challenge to grow ground cherries. Look at that beautiful, beautiful little ground cherry, ripe on the vine, ready for picking. Oddly enough, you don't pick the ground cherries, you wait for it to fall onto the ground. That's when it's at its height of ripeness. You let it fall. Well, if you have critters like I do, you sort of have to be very careful about doing that. Interesting enough, the first part of the growing season, the chipmunks and squirrels left everything alone, and I happily picked the fallen fruit that fell into the planter, because I had these in a planter. So I would root around in the bottom of the planter, looking under the limbs and leaves of the beautiful plant. Oh, Miss Molly's, or Aunt Molly's ground cherries is a beautiful, beautiful plant. And I would gather them, and then I would bring them in and see what's inside the little package, and then quickly put them in the freezer. As long as they were beautiful, beautiful yellow, I knew they were fully ripened. I've read that you don't want to eat the ones that are green, so if you happen to knock one off and it's still green on the inside, you could put it under a light, just like you would for a tomato, and it will ripen over time. So then I found I had to protect my ground cherry plant because the squirrels and the chipmunks found it. While I tried to decide, do I make a pie? Do I make a cobbler? In the fall, what do I do with these ground cherries that I've been harvesting and trying not to eat them all? Or do I make a hot sauce? I found a ground cherry hot sauce, but it called for 2 cups of ground cherries, and most recipes call for 2 cups. So I just continued to harvest until I could figure out what I wanted to do. I was also harvesting my rhubarb, and I like to put that in the freezer until I gather enough to make whatever it is I want to make. And all season, all summer, I've been making muffins with my rhubarb. Oh, they're delicious. Have you ever tried that? So I decided on hot sauce. But unfortunately, the recipe called for 2 cups of ground cherries, and the squirrels and chipmunks had already stolen quite a bit leading up until fall. So what was a girl to do? She's going to bring out her rhubarb and make ground cherry rhubarb hot sauce. Being a cook for over, 5 decades, if not more, I have learned what goes well together, and I thought the rhubarb and the ground cherry would go well together. So I had 1 cup of ground cherries, 1 cup of rhubarb, 1½ cups of vinegar, 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. You simmer that for 20 minutes over medium heat. Remove from the heat and add 1/4 cup of honey. Well, I had to add the jalapeno in the list of ingredients. What you do with that is you just slice it up, throw it in the pot with the rhubarb and the ground cherries. And you want to lightly simmer, just lightly simmer it over medium heat for about, they said 15 to 20 minutes, but I did mine for 20 because my jalapeno wasn't fully grown, so I don't know, I thought maybe, I just went the 20 minutes and let it simmer away. And it turned into just magnificent pot. Once it's done, you remove it from the heat, as I said before. You use your immersion blender, and then you add your honey. Give it a stir to try and break down all the bubbles. So here's the immersion blender after I removed it from the heat. So be careful. Don't lift it straight up when it's still running, or you're going to splatter yourself with hot sauce. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So I gave it quite the whiz with my immersion blender, or you could just put it in a regular blender if you want, but make sure you hold the lid with a towel over top. or you wait for it to cool down a little bit, because anything hot in a regular mixer or a blender will explode the lid right off, and you'll be having dripping from the ceiling if you're not careful. A good rule of thumb is to let it cool off a little bit first. There is nothing, I don't think, more enjoyable than blending something with your immersion blender. I love fall because I usually make a squash soup or something like that. But unfortunately, the weather has turned, and last night got down to 1 Celsius. Not last night, that was this morning, so it could have gotten even colder last night than 1 Celsius. We could have had snow, for goodness sakes, which in turn is 37 Fahrenheit, but with felt like 34. Yeah, felt like. So yesterday I'm out there and I'm cutting off all the tomatoes off the plants, and they're green, but they'll go red under a light. So I was cutting them off, and I took my butternut squash off. That was not much bigger than a mug coffee cup, but I thought, no, I'm not letting the cold just completely make it rotten. So I harvested it, and I harvested those jalapeno peppers. I had about 4 small ones that went into this hot sauce. So this sauce may be very, very hot, and I plan on eating some because it says it lasts a month, so in your refrigerator. So I decided I'm never going to get through all of that in a month's time, so I'm going to freeze some and then put it in my seal-a-meal after I freeze it. Maybe ice cube trays or something like that, freeze it, and then put it in seal-a-meal. So I ladled it into a jar after adding the honey, and isn't that beautiful? So I completely enjoyed growing ground cherries this year, and I hope you'll give it a try too. There's always something you can make with these wonderful ground cherries.